Okay, so I'd like to talk a bit about nutrition today and kind of get a lot of people on the same page, from client to trainer to dietitian to basically all of our staff here, and kind of go big picture and paint the big picture, if you will, of what our counseling philosophy here is, our nutritional philosophy, and just kind of explain that a little bit in more detail. This is a topic I have tended to avoid in the past in terms of publicly, because can be very confusing and misleading for a lot of people, and there's a lot of information in the media that is spread out that's very general and broad, and it's not always the best answer for each individual. So it's very confusing, and I try to keep it as general and vague as possible in the public, because this can be like talking about religion or politics for someone, and certain nutritional beliefs and principles are held on to almost like religion, and there's strong emotional ties with that, and some are religious practices. So it's something that is very tricky in a public setting. I really prefer to talk nutrition specifically in one-on-one counseling settings. Now, there's some general broad stroke beliefs that can be talked about, but it just gets too messy. So I'd rather sleep at night and not really get to the details there. But right now I'm going to kind of break it down with some general big picture philosophy, and kind of why I believe certain things, and what my true opinions and attitudes are on certain issues as well. But again, keep in mind that all this is generalized, and this is kind of to explain the counseling process and how I go about working with someone to actually get them the best plan for them. So one example of what I might mean by that is there's a lot of healthy foods out there that are considered health foods that may or may not fit onto, say, a performance plan or a weight loss plan, but is a healthy food and has healthy benefits and properties to it. And a good example is something like a yam or a sweet potato. There's a lot of great properties to that yam and sweet potato that give it a lot of good health benefits, but a lot of times on, say, a weight loss diet, it's not something I'm going to give a lot of. We may have it on there at the right time and place, but that doesn't mean we're just going to just liberalize those and say, oh, they're a healthy food, and that means you can eat as many as you want of them. And so that's just one simple point of how I may tell someone and communicate to someone that that's not exactly a good food for them to be eating. So it just depends on the time and place and the diet plan and what's going on. But if I were to tell that to some people, they would have this knee-jerk reaction that I'm sitting here saying that sweet potatoes are bad for you, and that's not at all what I'm trying to say. So stepping into this, there's some really big basic principles I look at to try to make sense of all this confusing world. And really, from my past experiences with this and all I've learned through school, is basically that it all boils down to these four big picture principles when it comes to nutritional counseling, or actually setting up a reasonable healthy diet plan for whatever your goal might be. And it comes down to quantity, quality, frequency, and timing, or I think of Q, F, and T. And those are the main principles I talk about with somebody. And when I talk to them in counseling, I would sit down and I would get a health history, their 3-day food record, a typical day, 24-hour recall, their health history, their goals, and all these things to let me know as much as possible about them and where they want to take this. But as I look at that, and we meet up for the first time, and we generally talk about some of their biggest barriers that they think they have, I then start to kind of paint the picture of what QQFT means and really how that's going to affect them. So by the end of the session, on the first day even, my goal is to get them a working template to take home that they can have a model and a plan to follow. And sometimes it's the biggest problem for a lot of people. So we work on that to kind of negotiate and bring together a plan that is a lifestyle change and not necessarily a quick fix. I mean, we have some extreme cases where someone wants it now or yesterday, and we got to come up with a really quick, detailed plan. However, it's really meant to be a lifestyle change based on their preferences, needs, abilities, and what I can get them to do, negotiate with to get to their goal, and the amount of time that they're actually looking for. So that really tailors our exact approach and what I may actually tell that person about nutrition and what they need, what will best serve them in terms of what they need to know. So when I bring up QQFT, it's just a quick way for them to remember all they should really ever have to know about nutrition. And again, it breaks down to quantity, quality, frequency, and timing. And I'm going to talk about those big principles first in kind of a broad stroke general sense, and I'm going to come back through and really specifically etch each one out, and because each area can be a little bit confusing, and that you can go in great detail on all of them. And from dietitian to, say, consumer, there's going to be, from the dietitian side of the fence, there's going to be all these research-oriented principles and evidence-based practice that really guides pretty much all decisions. The consumer is kind of led to believe a million different things based on what they've read and what they believe and what their friends told them has worked, what Shape magazine says, what Muscle and Fitness says, whatever, or even what the advertisers online or on the TV are telling them. So it gets to be a mess. I am in between on this to where I come from an evidence-based background, and I'm a big believer in science, but however, I'm also, the reason we call the gym the lab is because it's the lab of life, and it's something we take from the research lab and setting and science and put it into the real world, and we see what actually works, and sometimes we're able to actually innovate and find things that research is missing out on. Research can be slow and it's bogged down in certain details, whereas we are in the real world here, we can actually see things work faster, we can get to information and answers faster, and we can see things that may or may not ever be studied. So we can do things a little bit more quickly here, and from a huge track record and background of success with that and trial and error, we do have some liberties that we can take here based on experience. So, what I like to say is 80% of what we do here is very evidence-based and scientifically sound. The rest is based on learning from being in the field and seeing what works. So there's a lot to be said to that 20% there that a lot of scientists, researchers, and even dietitians and health experts, medical doctors even fall victim to, because that's the only thing that guides their decisions. So you got to really take the experience in the field work and put that into practice here, basically. So, and then we'll polish off with some more other details at the end on all these little contingencies, because there's so much to it. There's some black and white information, and there's some gray information in the middle. So here we go. So first Q would be quantity. So quantity of calories. Basically what we're talking about there is calories in versus calories out, and it's the golden rule of dietetics or weight loss and weight management. And the thing is that's talked about a lot, and I definitely believe in calorie control. I don't think calories are irrelevant. However, I think it's the wrong thing to focus on. So we mention that, and I tell it to a client, it's the golden rule. We got to respect calories in versus calories out. All of our programs here are based on burning a certain amount of calories per day, elevating resting metabolic rate by strength training and gaining lean mass. We don't do a lot of steady state cardio here, specifically in general for weight loss purposes. We do other nice ways to burn calories and raise resting metabolic rate. However, that math is important. Our true lifestyle it changes what's a little bit bigger and more effective. So not just burning calories while we're here or just extracting calories from the diet. We're optimizing that to get not a one-to-one work to benefit, but compound that to 1-2 kind of output on your investment of work or say nutritional approach. So what I also mean by this is that our clients that come here are very smart people, and most people in this day and age know that it's calories in versus calories out, or move more, work more, eat less, or take in less, and that makes a lot of sense. But it's simply not that simple. It does work, and it can work for a lot of people for great periods of time. But if you play, the calorie counting game or the calorie points game, like say with Weight Watchers, that can work for a certain amount of time, and it will work for sure. It's not as fun. You got to live like an accountant and count all these calories all day long, but you're really not learning a whole lot other than how to beat the system more than anything. Some people may take that pretty far and say, well, I'm on a 1,500 calorie diet, so I can eat whatever I want with 1,500 calories. And a lot of dietitians simply believe that, and that's simply not true. They will say a calorie is a calorie is a calorie, and I simply don't believe that. And we should all know better. If you've taken biochemistry, you've taken your organic chemistry, you've seen all the different molecules and how they're orchestrated. Although a carb and a protein have the same amount of calories per gram, they look completely different structurally, chemically, and they do different things. We know they do different things metabolically. So to simply correlate from the acute fact that they have the same amount of calories per gram is nonsense. We know that they both have different fates and abilities in the body. That's going to fall back more into the quality territory as well. So we'll come back to that. But I tell the client, okay, it's calories in versus calories out. You know this. You've heard this a million times in your life. But we know that knowledge does not change behavior. So I'm not going to spend time condescending them by talking about calorie control all day. If they want to know how many calories they need for their day, I will tell them information. I don't classically just do the math and say, this is your perfect number of calories that you need based on your activity level and what your goals are. That's a waste of time, and people get focused on that number more than anything versus actually looking at the quality and health of their diet and their day-to-day practices. Likewise, that changes, and why calorie counting is only going to work for so long. If I'm 200 pounds and I get on a certain caloric restriction to lose X amount of weight, it's going to work for a certain amount of time, but as I lose weight, I have to also restrict the amount of calories because my total caloric need is going to go down. And you restrict and you restrict and restrict, metabolic rate slows down, your quality of life and happiness goes down because all you're doing is restricting calories. That's only going to work for so long until everything just downgrades and you feel like crap, you feel like you're starving yourself, and so many people fall off the wagon there. And research has proven that even focusing on calories versus quality of calories is actually going to help, and focusing on the quality of the diet will help lose fat more than actually simply counting calories. And a big part of that is simple fallout. Over the past 10 years, many success stories, and I can only think, on one hand, and really only one person really stands out in my mind that has been successful at doing that over the long haul. And I'm talking 5 years or more in that kind of ball game there. So that is, a 30-second conversation, calories in versus calories out, next. And I also say though that if we're having trouble in our program in our quantity, frequency, or quality, frequency, and timing realm, we will come back to calorie counting and tighten it up. So if we're failing on the plan, yeah, we're going to have to go on a check system here and make sure the calories are tight and count them to hold them accountable. So no matter what, we're going to find success. And there is definitely a time and place for it. And if someone wants to know the protein, carb, and fat gram percentage of their diet, those things can come into play for sure, but it's really not the first focus here. Our first focus is looking at, when I see their 3-day food record, I can actually see what their total caloric intake and their balance of protein, carb, and fat is, and see what is accurate to them. I can come up with a mathematical formula, but many times that can be very, very wrong based on their activity for the day, based on the formula that I used, or however, a whole slew of other variables I can throw off that number. And it's only good for the one time that I calculated it. It's going to change every single day, so why on earth will we go through that process? But if I look at their 3-day record, I can actually look at what their average of calorie intake is and quantify what they're truly taking in. And as long as it's an accurate recall, I can actually quantify that and see what their actual intake is and what's making them what they are today. So that's the true answer. I may see that they're only taking, say, 1,800 calories in, and they're getting so much of this protein, carb, and fat, but they are 250 plus pounds as a 5'3" female, and something's going on here. I've seen this over and over and over and over where things don't seem to add up like that. Absolutely, there's definitely error in report on this for sure. I explore those variables. We look at that, but there's a lot more to it that a lot of dietitians falsely assume that it's just calories in versus calories out. We learn a lot of things in school, and if you are stuck at that point, you're really not maximizing the education and the knowledge that you have. There's so much more to it. So after looking at calories, you can accentuate results, speed results, by looking at quality, frequency, and time. So letting them know, again, we'll come back to calories, but again, it's the wrong focus at this point moving forward. What we need to focus in on is the quality of calories, and this is the biggest area that I really like the people to learn about. It's also the most confusing area. Like I mentioned yams earlier, all kinds of food, any food can fit into a diet. Let's say that, first of all, just a broad stroke statement. Anything can fit into a diet. Depends on what your goal is. And it really depends on how fast you want to see your goal. Certain food, I'm not going to say, when I say that any food can fit into a diet, I'm not saying that chocolate cake is healthy and good for you. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that it depends on what your goal is, your activity level, what the situation is will really answer that question specifically. Now, I mentioned earlier about if I had a diet A and diet B and I gave you the same caloric intake, and one had a certain amount of protein, carb, and fat, and it was from certain food sources, and the other had a different percentage of protein, carb, and fat with other food sources. What I'm saying in black and white terms here is that you can get a different result by manipulating the source of those 1,500 calories on diet A versus diet B and get a faster result. And this is absolutely true. I've seen it over and over and over and over, and anyone who believes otherwise really needs to reevaluate the belief system and perhaps try something out and put that to the test. There's definitely a change there. And the research, they're finally getting a little bit better with this, and they're finally looking at things like lean body mass in the research, not just weight loss and things like that. You would see the 1,500 calorie diet and with two approaches, say a lower carb approach versus a higher carb approach. And in the long run, you may see similar weight loss changes, but you're not going to see necessarily the same lean mass changes versus fat mass changes. And even so early on, you see faster weight loss results with, say, the lower carb sort of approach there. And we'll get into those details in a moment. But so you have a faster result out of the gate, which clients want to see right away. It increases compliance to the diet because they want to see results yesterday. When they come here, they're paying a lot of money to see this result and see it now. So counting calories and this, anything can fit into a diet with as long as you're respecting your calorie approach. It isn't for everybody, and if someone's their dedication and their willpower is weak, and they got to have certain foods, well, we'll fall more on that kind of side of the fence. But if they want results in now, we're going to manipulate the quantity of calories and the quality of calories more specifically. And looking at that, there's so much to the quality, from looking at, say, diet A here that we mentioned, and it's filled with, say, things like chicken breast, broccoli, high fibrous foods, even fruits. You could even perhaps throw some whole grains and things like that in there. High satiety, high filling foods that's going to make you feel full, like you've eaten something, provide some bulk into the stomach, and it's going to delay your hunger for the next meal. The other diet, let's look at, say, Oreo cookies and Big Macs and things like that, and it's 1,500 calories. Well, that's not very satisfying. It's not going to make you feel like you had much. I mean, you may feel like crap for a while because your stomach just got hit with a bomb, but you're going to raise your blood sugar levels, insulin's going to come out, drop it down, your blood sugar's low, and you're going to start craving more junk food like that. So it's not as satisfying of an approach. So when you look at simple things like that, you think about all the food volume. If I put 1,500 calories of, say, the chicken breast, broccoli, whole food type things, and junk foods in two different piles, you're simply looking at a much larger mass of food on one pile versus the next. So 1,500 calories goes a much further way here versus the other pile. So just the concept for some people, just like to eat food. They just like to graze and munch on food and feel like they actually have had something. So when someone's dieting, that's a fantastic place to be, so you don't feel like you're actually starving. So likewise, if you think the hormones involved with actually chewing, that's going to increase satisfaction by the brain that you've actually eaten something, taking the time to chew and have food, even though it's lower in calories, is a great strategy. Next, looking at the quality of calories, really after calorie control, and in my opinion, almost more important, but very powerful at least, if not more important, is hormone control. The number one, several hormones that are a consideration here, and that's for a whole other video, but specifically for fat loss, I'm looking at things like insulin, HGH, IGF-1, you look at testosterone, estrogen, and definitely cortisol. All those are radically connected to this whole approach here, but the number one thing is definitely insulin. And everyone's familiar with this whole insulin thing these days, with all the low carb dieting and all this stuff. And I'm here to tell you, I've seen it over and over and over. Controlling insulin is magical when you look at fat loss. So if I have those two diets again, one of the things that insulin's an anabolic hormone, anabolic for fat tissue, anabolic for muscle tissue, and I can manipulate that differently for our goal. But if our goal is specifically fat loss, I want insulin to come down as much as possible all day long. There's no reason to have it elevated. So if we're looking at say a recovery response, or to increase IGF-1 or even HGH for workout's sake, we may spike that post-workout with some sort of food substance, but really that's a whole other side of the fence. What we're looking at for fat loss is to keep insulin at bay all day long with calorie control. That's going to speed up results. So that's the main thing I want to really hit on at first with, say, hormones, and we'll come back to other topics on that. But so far we've discussed briefly quantity and very briefly on quality. We're looking at frequency and timing are the next two steps. So likewise, to elaborate a little bit, on the quality of calories, looking at insulin-provoking foods. So when I'm looking at categories of protein, carbs, and fats, what foods actually will provoke insulin and mess with blood sugar levels, and how am I going to control those? So there's a term, glycemic index, many people may or may not be familiar with, and some people are on the fence whether this has any connection at all with fat loss. That is perhaps, in my opinion, extremely silly. When you look at the way appetite works in terms of craving sweet foods, craving sugary foods, even there's great research now on just how the brain will actually release insulin as a response to something sweet, whether there's calories in it or not. Diet soda, chewing gum, the sweet taste at all will trigger an insulin response. That is going to drop your blood sugar levels, making you crave sweeter foods instantly. So that's really going to torture someone who's trying to go into caloric deficit, or someone who may have a really bad sweet tooth. So consider that as we talk about glycemic index. Glycemic index is basically the rate at which glucose or sugar from food would actually be broken down, released into the bloodstream, and then digested and assimilated and metabolized by the body. Why that's important: when you have a higher glycemic index sort of food coming into the bloodstream, you have this huge insulin response, and what the body's really seeing is how fast it's coming in, and it's going to give it a proportional amount of insulin released into the bloodstream to deal with that response.
And so the more insulin there, the higher, longer it's going to be there, the lower your blood sugar is going to drop, and the more of a radical response you're going to get from that. So considering that all day long is something you want to look at when looking at fat loss. Otherwise, you're sort of chasing this blood sugar cascade all day long. You're messing with your appetite cues, and it's going to be real hard to not grab the right foods at each meal. So another way we blunt that is looking at frequency and timing. Now, when we focus on the quality foods eaten at the right times and at the right frequency, we're really going to end up fixing a lot of problems here. So appetite regulation, focusing on quality foods at each meal, not starving yourself. This whole fasting thing as well is another whole issue. But when you look at eating the right foods at the right times, and you eat, let's say, for a generic example, every 2 to 3 hours, nothing more than 3 hours, however, and you eat those high satiety-based foods, high fiber foods, higher protein type foods, you're actually going to end up taking in less calories throughout the day by focusing on eating the right foods and making sure you don't miss a meal. What a fun game. You don't have to miss a meal. You get to eat on a schedule. You don't go long periods without eating. A lot of people go on the starvation plan, trying to reduce the caloric intake, and later on, when they do eat, it's either not going to be a very good meal, or they're going to eat much more calories than they would have in it anyway. So the idea here is that you're going to be able to control blood sugar levels by eating small, frequent meals as soon as you wake up, all day long, say basically every 3 hours or so there. And you're going to have foods that are not going to impact blood sugar too much and keep this very low to moderate glycemic response. So you're never hungry. You're constantly have something to eat within our the plan that we will talk about at the end here and how we put the day together. And we'll select foods from a certain list that's easy to follow and quick and easy, and the day starts to come together. And so appetite is strongly controlled. You're always satisfied, and you end up not having these blood sugar swings and crashes. So the biggest key to the success there for this not to unravel is to not miss a meal and to stick to the appropriate foods for each meal. Now, looking at frequency and feeding, now talking about starving and how there's even recent research comparing 6 meals to 3 meals, and the research would state that 6 meals and 3 meals had no difference in their study. There's a lot of limitations in the study, but the biggest one I want to illustrate here is that when you compare 6 meals a day to 3 meals a day, and you don't look at, say, something like glycemic index or glycemic response, and you're having a high sugar sort of, or even if it was a healthy carbohydrate type food at each meal, excluding, say, vegetables, we'll say, let's say it's a whole grain at breakfast, even a piece of fruit perhaps as a snack in the mid-morning. You have your whole grain sandwich at lunch. You have your whole grain muffin in the mid-afternoon. You have pasta or, say, brown rice or something at dinner. Well, what's happening here is you're getting starch and sugar loads and blood sugar responses to be jacked up all day long. Insulin is going to be chronically secreted all day long. Every 3 hours you're pulsing it. That's a great way to gain weight. Insulin is an anabolic hormone. Hormones establish and determine what's going to take place metabolically in the blood system and in the entire body, regardless of calories. So making insulin respond, even in a caloric deficit, is going to actually make fat loss a much harder ballgame. So looking at that, 3 meals versus 6 meals, that study is kind of a moot point. And if we did something as simple as in those snacks in between breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and even, say, a late night snack there, decrease the glycemic response, or even had, say, more of a focus on, say, a protein type snack or a healthy fat type snack or even a veggie based snack, that's not going to affect insulin or blood sugar levels, and it's not going to create that chronic release of insulin. So and that's my main point on that. But another thing to consider with carbohydrate intake is it has to be appropriate to your activity level and your goal. So when you look at someone like Michael Phelps, and this kind of gets into the timing side of things as well. When you look at someone like Michael Phelps, the guy eats 10 to 12,000 calories a day, and it's all terrible junk food. The guy, however, is very lean and ripped and looks amazing, and he's healthy by the fact that I'm sure that he's training 6 hours a day, 7 days a week. But the second that guy, let's say we break his arms and legs, he's going to start gaining weight radically, and his health is going to be wrecked in a matter of 30 days. And he will start gaining weight like anybody. So when you look at energy-based foods like that, and so simple sugars, carbohydrates, even whole grain foods, everything will break down in the bloodstream the same. If you look at, say, whole grain oatmeal, quinoa, to a Snickers bar, you name it, cookies, they're going to break down to glucose in the bloodstream. It's just at different rates that they occur. So what I'm saying is, if I have 40 grams of a cookie and 40 grams of, say, brown rice, that on the label both have 40 grams of, say, carbohydrate within that meal, they're basically all going to be breaking down to the same thing, just at different rates of speed. there's some details like fiber content and stuff like that you can consider, but not the main point of discussion here. So ultimately what's going to happen is you have to deal with that energy that you just took in. The muscles are going to be able to break down and assimilate that into sugar and store some of it for muscular energy. However, the overspill there, say like someone like Phelps, that 12,000 calories worth, is going to have to be utilized. Phelps will go burn it off immediately in his training right away. So as soon as it gets in, it's going to start burning off. If someone else did that, you've got the average person has 400 to 600 grams of glycogen storage within their body, about 50 to 100 grams in the liver, and very marginal amounts in their bloodstream. And if you think about that storage warehouse and how much you're burning within your workout, those storage potentials actually overfill very quickly. And if you're eating starch, and even, I say starch is a broad term, so that could be cookies, could be whole grain pasta, a lot of those carbohydrate type foods. If they start to overwhelm your storage potential, that's really they immediately will start storing as triglycerides or body fat. And we have an unlimited storage potential or warehouse of fat cells to actually store. So you see 800 to 1,000 pound people these days, just to illustrate the point that there's no storage, there's no finite ability to do that. When you look at carbohydrate, however, once you get to those 400 to 600 grams in the muscles, in the liver and blood, it goes immediately to body fat. So you got to balance out how that intake is meeting your actual physical activity needs. Now, hopefully that clears that subject up a little bit. Then looking at, so again on frequency, going back to the starvation concept, there is some interesting things looking at starvation or intermittent fasting, things like that. It's one thing to do that every now and then as a form of, say, cleaning your system out, but if you're eating a high fiber diet, drinking plenty of fluids and exercising, that's your day-to-day detoxification system. You're cleaning yourself out chronically. If that's your lifestyle, then you're going to basically be living in a way that chronically cleans yourself out. But that's not something you want to do every single day of your life. It's going to be a chronic wasted state. You're not going to be able to maintain your lean body mass very well. Metabolic rate severely slows down, and it's a very, very poor quality of life. And if anything, you're going to be extending your latest years. I mean, there's some interesting aging information with that in terms of extending life. Not so much in humans necessarily, but it's kind of like, you want a quality of life in living into your 120s, or do you want to live a healthier, stronger life now with your ability to recover lean body mass and be strong and functional now? So, interesting topic nevertheless. Now, looking at timing, in its general coverage here, that's where it gets also very confusing. So looking at exercise needs, typically intense exercise or even say running to a degree, there's a certain amount of carbohydrate and fat used for each activity. And when you're looking at, say, weight training or fight or flight response or sprinting at least, you're using a high amount of sugar by the muscles and body to actually perform that task. Now, to do that, and like I said about Phelps, if your goal is to lose weight, we're going to control calories, we're going to control quality of calories, but we need those calories for basic, intense physical activity needs coming from your whole grain type starches, your cookies, your Snickers bar, any of those things. And Snickers bar, yes, you can argue that it's got a low glycemic response. It's got a similar glycemic response as almost even oatmeal actually. But when you're looking at the source of the food, it's junk. I mean, other than peanuts, which is a whole other debate. But so bottom line, some people do actually promote that as, say, a pre-workout snack or even a post-workout snack, as long as you're meeting your caloric needs for the day. To me, that's just insane. You can work certain things in the diet and you can get away with those things. It just depends on your activity level. So again, that's where everyone's individual answer is going to have to be crafted here. But my point being that if you ate a Snickers bar any other time of the day, right now as I'm talking to you, I'm burning 80 to 90% of my calories from fat cells or aerobic metabolism. So my Krebs cycles are functioning. I'm getting enough off of fatty acids. I'm able to get oxygen to fuel my Krebs cycle. I can burn fat as fuel. The amount of sugar I need right now to operate my brain and central nervous system is very low, and my body has the ability to get that sugar from anything. From protein, carbon, fat, it can break down any of those elements through a process called gluconeogenesis to get that sugar. I don't need to carb load in order to do that all day long. I don't need to get a Snickers bar so I can focus better. Eating food is one thing, and even eating, say, a piece of chicken can actually stabilize blood sugar, believe it or not. So it's an interesting paradox there, but you don't need to be loading yourself up just to sit down and do your normal physical or daily activities. When it comes to physical activity, though, you do need more of that high performance, high octane kind of fuel where you can get those carbohydrates to fuel performance. So in a simple way to look at this, if you're on a fat loss plan and you want to maintain lean body mass, or perhaps even gain, you could think of it as, I need to prioritize my starchy foods or my carbohydrate-based foods before workout and after workout. I need to get them before workout to get the blood sugar up for actual training needs, so that it's right there, ready to shuttle to muscles to actually utilize for exercise and muscle contractions. And likewise afterwards to refuel those muscle glycogen stores we talked about to get back to the muscles for recovery's sake. That muscle glycogen will stay within that muscle for recovery purposes, but also for the next workout, so the muscles have glycogen to utilize for their actual training session. That's a generic, simple way to look at that. There's a lot more extreme detail when it comes to that category, and it gets very confusing. But the rest of the day, if we focus on non-insulin impacting type foods, like proteins, vegetables, healthy fats, you can see why we might choose certain foods at various times of the day. So we can manipulate nutrient timing for different hormonal responses and appetite cues and control for the whole day. So you have now a brief overview of quantity, quality, frequency, and timing, and what that really might mean. But this is where the details really start to come together for the person, and based on what their preferences in terms of food preferences are, their lifestyle, their actual goals, and how many calories they actually have to get in, their work barriers, time barriers, things like that. But one thing I always would like to come back to really explain fat loss in a more cutthroat sort of fashion is if you look at something as simple like the activity of, say, bodybuilders and figure competitors, or what their actual specific goal is. Now, this is not something that's been looked at very close in research at all. And if you look, to me, success leaves cues. And if you really look at people doing it in the real world, or in a lab rat sort of setting, their goal is to maximize lean body mass, build it as fast as possible, keep it there, but also to be as lean as possible, to lose as much body fat as possible while maintaining that lean body mass. These people are experts in the business of doing this. Dietitians are experts in medical nutrition therapy. You name it, there's all kinds of amazing skills and traits there, but that's one thing that's not completely well understood across the industry. When it comes to that, we have a hard time accepting something that is not 30 years of research, evidence-based kind of proof. So please, for just put your guard down with this and look at what we see in the field of, say, bodybuilding and figure competitors. They've really got this down. And of course, there's differences in people, and there's different types of people. You look at endomorphs, mesomorphs, ectomorphs. There's actually a difference in how they will process and handle different percentages of protein, carbs, and fat, and their caloric needs, and what they will tolerate better. There's a difference there. But in a brief nutshell, looking at what they will do for a competition, the simple way to look at this is for 12 to 16 weeks before a competition, they'll eat nothing but foods like chicken and broccoli exclusively, on top of strength training for an hour or so a day, cardiovascular exercise as well for an hour a day perhaps, but you could say an average of 2 hours of exercise a day, sometimes 1 hour depending on the person, but you're looking at a good 6-day schedule of training in a competitive bodybuilder figure competitor's lifestyle. And eating such a restricted diet of chicken and broccoli. Now think of chicken as lean proteins like fish, tilapia, even lean proteins like flank steak, or lean beef rather, grass-fed beef, egg whites, those sorts of things. And broccoli could be any kind of sort of green vegetable, or green leafy vegetable, spinach, lettuce, anything kind of within that realm. And you get carrots and tomatoes, people ask about a lot. Not the biggest deal. I mean, ultimately, if your problem is carrots and tomatoes, really, then there's something bigger wrong there. But I've never seen anyone become overweight or not very lean because of tomatoes or carrots or things like that. So that's not my point at all. But basically, it's a protein and vegetable-based diet that they follow to get to that lean and mean state there. So that's this far into the continuum, and then you have your typical average American here who may fall into something more that looks like the food guide pyramid. So, and they actually look like the pyramid. So if you look at how far this extreme is of this continuum, that's not a lifestyle. It works. We know that it is a great way to maintain and even sometimes gain lean body mass, but to lose fat mass and preserve that state. That's what our clients come here to do. That's what people want, is to look like that person on Men's Health, the cover of their magazine with the six-packs and all that. They want to look good naked. So looking at what these people are doing in the real world, it's a very effective plan. It works. It is a crash course. It is not a lifestyle that they follow forever. In the off season, many of them gain weight. They add some extra fat mass, but that's sort of this immediate fleeting state that they get to get on stage. So the point being that is an effective way to lose body fat and gain lean body mass, or maintain lean body mass. So how far do we have to get to something like that to get our results, but also not go off the deep end and live that restrictively, get more variety into our diet and maintain for the long run? So how far do you want to take it? Also, you got to ask yourself, how quickly do you want to see your goal? Do you want to see it, next month? Or do you want to see it 12 months from now? Or do you not really care? You just want to live a healthier lifestyle? All that factors in how far we may go towards that direction. So liberating the vegetable sources to any other sort of vegetable source. You get a rainbow color variety of vegetables there. And fruits are an interesting area, and we'll talk about that. But vegetables specifically, you can liberate and get everything you possibly need out of a vegetable that you could get out of a fruit. So fruits are not essential necessarily. I'm not saying they're bad or evil or anything like that, but they can just be problematic in some cases. Now, the proteins, again, liberate that to the variety that I sort of mentioned. Pretty much looking at any, I would promote wild, free-range type stuff, ethically raised, where you can get organic. That's all fine and great, but honestly, if you're going from breaded chicken breast to Snooks, even Tyson chicken breast, that's a better step. So it depends where you're at in all this. Ideally, getting to a nice free-range, organic, locally grown chicken breast, that would be fantastic. But this is the real world, and you got to see where you fall in that spectrum there. So looking at now, we've really talked about why the quantity, quality, the frequency, and timing come together, and we've talked a bit more about that quality concept. So once we have that established, now we've looked at a lot of things that are for simple fat loss and muscle gain needs. There's certain ways I may go with this, and there's certain ways I kind of communicate certain ideals and beliefs. But what I like to do is, in this process, bring up a few points. And first, I will set up the schedule for their day. When you wake up, when you go to sleep, as soon as you wake up, we're going to put down, say it's 6 a.m. We write down 6 a.m. When is lunch? Okay, it's 12 p.m. When's dinner? Oh, it's 6 p.m. Well, we've got 3 meals there that I'm going to add in simple snacks throughout the day. So meal and snack is a synonymous term here. So we would write down the schedule at 6, 9, 12, 3, and 6 for the most part on average. We've got 5 meals there and perhaps a 9 o'clock late night snack. And so what we're going to do there is work on the preferences and foods they like, and we'll populate a list of the protein type foods they like and they'll eat. Vegetarians will come up with an alternative list on foods we can get for them. It might be something like plain Greek yogurt or say cheese sticks, mixed nuts. If we got to go to Boca burgers and stuff like that, we'll do that. Different sorts of tofu options if we have to, but we'll get to the muddiness of that in a minute. And then we'll populate a vegetable-based list, and then some healthy starches I might get in for their actual workout needs, or that's where I may put in their fruits, higher sugar fruits like apples, bananas, oranges. I don't throw them a lot into the diet, but they're not evil. It's just where I might put them to maximize their usage. So if I'm going to get some simple sugar in like that, I'm going to put it around a workout versus sitting here reading a book. Berries, very low sugar food. It's very hard to overeat berries, very similar to vegetables, so I liberate berries to as much as you want. Blackberries, blueberries, strawberries, you name it, whatever you want. It's kind of hard to overeat those as well. So in terms of berries and vegetables, I don't care. It's kind of open game. Eat as much as you want. I used to eat a pound of broccoli a day just to keep myself from eating other foods when I had to keep my weight down for weight classes and competitions, and it kept me from eating other foods. Some people use chips, some people use popcorn. Broccoli definitely beats both of those in that category, makes you feel very full and satisfied. So once I have that list, then we start talking about their day and when their workout is, and that workout will establish some of those timing principles, and we'll start selecting foods that will meet the needs of each meal and their actual goals. So then looking at their 3-day or typical intake, I start to put that together. Lunch a lot of times looks like some sort of green leafy salad. They can usually get that at work or travel with them. It's easy to buy it even at Schnucks. And we work around something like that, focusing on protein and vegetables there. Dinner, and this all depends on their workout time as well. Dinner, we try to focus on something that's cooked at home, or if they're at a restaurant, they'll focus on a lean protein that they can get there. If they cook it or grill it at home, we talk about the best cooking practices or food sources to get for that. But always at any restaurant, even at McDonald's now, you can get a chicken breast salad. So at worst case scenario, you've always got a solution and an option. But at home is a great chance to get those proteins with some more obscure vegetables they may not get throughout the rest of the day. So cruciferous vegetables, things broccoli, cauliflower, things like that. Maybe something like asparagus, things that they're not going to get in all day long very easily. So I'm strategically working in vegetables at lunch and dinner each day. And also late night snacking, I'm a big fan of, say, raw vegetables they can get in there. So vegetables are one of our best friends for fat loss as well as protein. And I haven't really elaborated on protein yet. I will get to that in a minute. In terms of the fat loss connection there and why we might use a certain amount of protein for fat loss versus muscle gain. But however, when it comes to the rest of the day, breakfast is a big interesting paradox there, but we're trying to actually go to something more like eggs and berries there, or say plain Greek yogurt and berries, versus these, oatmeal is a healthy food, just depends on the person when they're working out. I try to break people with cereal, things like that, and we work more towards either the oatmeal side of the fence if they need the starch load for the morning. Otherwise, we're going to something more like eggs and berries along that nature, or even some kind of lean animal protein, salmon, things of that nature, even say some mixed nuts and things like that. But then during the snack times, I'm a big believer in food first, supplement second. Protein powders and bars, that's like plan C. We got plan A and B, and it's better to have something like that than to miss a meal. But even those sweet kind of foods that are even, say, a low carb food will actually stimulate insulin levels mid-meal, like those other foods we discussed earlier. So not the best option. Plus, it's really not very satisfying either. So we look at quick snacks, and a lot of times we may look at things like could be boiled eggs, could be plain Greek yogurt, could be the mixed nuts, chicken foil tuna sort of packs that travel well. We got all sorts of things we'll come up with and populate. Could be a lettuce wrap, low salt deli turkey or something like that, or even deli roast beef, leftovers that are an appropriate portion of, say, chicken breast, steak, fish, you name it. Whatever works for them in that time. But my goal on that, say that 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock and even p.m. 9 o'clock snack, is that they can eat it in 30 seconds or less. It has to be super quick or they're going to skip that meal. A big part of this approach is that they don't miss a meal. So the big thing there is to make sure they're sticking to that schedule. The hardest thing for them to do, other than shopping and getting that food ready to go, and the fact that we negotiated foods that they actually like and will eat, is actually not missing meals. So I have them set alarms on their phones, whatever they got to do to actually make sure they're sticking to that plan. The second they start skipping meals is the second appetite cues start getting messed up, metabolic rate gets messed up, blood sugar levels start getting erratic, and they start falling off the plan and choosing foods that they should normally be choosing, and they start wanting to snack on other things, or that meal later in the day starts to grow. So absolutely crucial to hold the whole day together. Now, this is where, once I've got that whole day kind of mapped up generally, I really refine that based on the goals. Some people get more starch than others. Some people get more the whole grains from, or even, say, yams, brown rice, quinoa, those sorts of things. If someone's coming from this world of eating just total junk all day long, I don't go to that sort of extreme clean kind of state if they're not ready for it. But we kind of negotiate and improve where they're at. It just depends how fast they want to see it. So this is where I get into something a little bit more obscure and controversial, and that is discussing some other beliefs. Now, there's definitely some good science, more so than a lot of people like to give to it, but it's right now more of a belief and a philosophy than anything else. Everything we've discussed so far is about scientific principles and real-world success in terms of maintaining and gaining lean body mass and dropping fat mass in the fastest amount of time possible. We've optimized caloric intake, even portion control, and the quality of calories and hormonal control. We've done it really, we're using all the tools in the book we can to make this result occur. We're not here to just make someone's life and that's just healthier. Some people that's their goal, but we're here to give them the best result possible and the best lifestyle possible. They want the best life has to offer, the best money can buy. That's what that's all for. I don't have the luxury of being wrong here. I don't have that ability. Someone, if I'm just giving them what I think I learned in school, and this is what my beliefs are in school based on what I've been spoon-fed for all these years, it doesn't matter. I am here and I'm paid to get results, and I guarantee them. So I don't have the luxury of being wrong. So when I'm going to look at bodybuilders and figure competitors and things like that and see what they're doing to drive success, that tells me something. We've seen it happen over and over here in the lab. We've had radical success stories with this, and we're always increasing the quality of the nutrient profile of their diet, adding in vegetables, getting the right lean proteins, and appropriately balancing, say, the vegetarian's diet. So that is all the metabolic and mathematical side of things to do that. Now, big picture obscure sort of things, and to me it's not so obscure. To some people it's a leap. But when you look at what a healthy diet is, the diets we discussed are completely healthy. And some people are already thinking, oh, you're restricting certain food groups. You restrict, say, maybe dairy or, say, certain grains and things like that. we can actually get all the needs we need out of those foods through animal proteins and vegetables, and we're not missing anything actually. And we're looking at dairy with protein and calcium needs, or say the carbohydrate needs from starch. Yeah, we can get those things, but your body can still break down anything and turn it into glucose, and you know that if you're a dietitian. So there's a lot to be said about that, and we could go on for hours and hours about this. But when you look at the bigger picture here of what humans were actually intended to eat, and that's the paleo diet. So this is the paleo diet, the caveman diet, whatever you want to call it. This book came out about 10 years ago, and by an anthropologist, and really he basically studied what humans have been eating since evolution, if you believe in that, whatever. But they've actually looked at skeletons from 200,000 plus years and studying what our ancestors basically have eaten. And looking at this, a lot of dietitians want to think this is crackpot stuff, but there's a lot of actual good scientific background behind this. But that actually, at the end of the day, I really don't even care. When you look at the simplicity of this, you look at, say, things in nature and what they actually consume. Like, for example, you look at wild dogs. You look at lions and tigers and bears. They don't have health experts in nature. They don't have anybody telling them what to do. They have an innate desire to eat what they're supposed to eat. However, when we take those animals and we put them in captivity and we feed them these artificial sort of diets, and like dog foods and things like that, and perhaps hay, or even cattle that we feed grain, you see them all gain weight and become obese. And they're on a diet where they can choose to eat as much as they want to choose. There's no calorie control. There's no portion control. None of these interesting human behaviors that we have. But they start to gain weight. They have diabetes. They get hip problems. They get overweight, cardiovascular issues. As soon as we change up their diet, they're not as physically active either. So you look at that connection, and it's pretty eye-opening. But when you look at that in nature, they're not walking around with diabetes. They die from natural causes and fighting with each other. But they're lean and mean, and they don't have the same sort of health maladies that we now experience. To me, that's all I need to know. That's pretty eye-opening information. And most dietitians and health experts are back a plant-based diet and those sorts of things. It's just, where do we draw the line and what's an acceptable plant-based food? And that's where it gets really confusing and interesting. So I'm going to stop for now, and we're going to come back and really elaborate on the specific paleo principles and what they might mean, and looking at paleo in terms of its point. My point is that it's a nice, healthy menu and should help select what you actually choose for your day-to-day lifestyle. It's not gospel. This is not some kind of cult. This is not forced down anyone's throats. And it's something I bring up last because it's just an interesting lifestyle to consider, and it helps even further guide someone's nutritional choices for their day. If they, typically on a paleo diet, it's discouraged to have dairy, grains, or legumes. That's where it gets very muddy and confusing, and people get very upset over that information. But when you look at those principles, and you look at some of the potential health benefits from that, there's actually a lot of eye-opening stuff I'm seeing anecdotally. There's actually a lot of more and more research out there, and a lot of people say, oh, there's no research to back this. There is research there. You got to just look for it. And when you do a search for paleo diet on PubMed, that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for some simple things like grain restriction, gluten restriction, those sorts of reactions. Looking at specific reactions to dairy themselves, or even legumes and soy and that sort of research. You got to look at the small individual pieces. Paleo's too much of a broad search term. You got to look at the specifics on this. And in our day and age, and by the time we go and die, that information is not going to be well researched by the time we're there. So I'm using common sense and intuition to learn from nature to see how we can optimize our science and our day-to-day activity here. So again, it's just merely suggestion, and if you look at those principles and how they fit very nicely with everything we talked about mechanically, mathematically, with fat loss and muscle gain, they fit perfectly with each other. And where some people kind of get hung up is on this idea that it's all low carb, and it's absolutely not. You can eat carb all day long on a paleo diet. You're getting it, first of all, in the form of vegetables, the right amount of fruits we would put in based on your goal. And when it comes to the starch department, you have yams, quinoa, and rice as more of a liberated sort of paleo-friendly kind of food that's been around for much longer periods of time that most humans can tolerate. So it is all there. All the tools you need for a well, sound, healthy diet are there. And it's not something that, again, that is forced down anyone's throats. It's a lifestyle choice that some people maybe really get into, because there's a lot of possibility there. There's a lot of potential benefit there. And why discourage that or hold anyone back from that? And, for me, I do choose to live that lifestyle, and I feel that is absolutely correct. That doesn't mean it's correct for the client or the person I'm working with. I'm going to work with whatever decisions they make to optimize their lifestyle, their goal, whatever they believe in, and I'm going to make the best scenario possible for them. It's merely a suggestion to really talk about. So next we're going to really go into the specific details of the paleo diet and what that means and what some of the ground rules are. And then again we'll go full spectrum, big picture on everything we talked about today, and kind of give you some complete closure on that. And then how we would kind of conclude with putting up that day and selecting the right foods to make this day work, perhaps for some different scenarios and goals. So thank you.